Ready to unlock some secrets of Anglo-American culture.
I like that. Unlock some secrets.
Well, today's deep dive takes us into l'anglais pour les nuls.
Okay.
I think this is going to be a really good one.
Yeah.
We're going to be pulling out all those little interesting cultural and language things
You're right.
that will help people really navigate the culture like a pro.
Yeah. Think of it this way. We're giving you the inside scoop on everything from pronunciation,
Oh, yeah.
to how to make small talk. And trust me, some of these cultural quirks, they're pretty entertaining.
That's what I'm excited about. And speaking of aha moments, this guide, it jumps right into the world of pronunciation.
Yeah.
Now, I know what you're thinking, not another boring pronunciation lesson.
Right.
But this is different because it highlights how those subtle differences in like vowel sounds, like live versus leave,
Right.
or pin versus pen.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's those little subtle differences that can completely change the meaning of what you're saying.
And it's not just about individual sounds, right? It's about mastering like the rhythm of English.
Oh, right.
Like that stressed, unstressed syllable pattern.
That's what gives it that musicality.
Exactly.
So instead of sounding like a robot,
right.
you start to sound more natural,
You start to internalize that. It's like anything, like music or language, whatever,
Yeah.
When you start to feel that rhythm, then it becomes part of you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like you're finding the musicality of the language.
Yeah.
And the guide even suggests practicing phrases.
Yeah.
While like tapping your foot.
Yeah.
To get a feel for that natural rhythm.
Right.
I love that.
Imagine yourself like, walking down the street in London or New York or something.
Okay.
And, you're just navigating all these conversations.
Oh, I love it.
Because you have that down. You have that musicality down.
Okay. I have to admit, I'm already tapping my foot. But before we get too far into,
Right.
all the fun stuff,
Yeah.
we've got to talk about the backbone
Yeah. Grammar.
of any language.
Grammar.
It's important.
It is. And I know for a lot of people, it feels like a chore.
Right.
But this guide, I think, makes it kind of fun.
It focuses on the practical, like what you're going to be using every day.
Exactly.
You know.
Like you're building a house. You got to have that strong foundation so you can build the rest of the house.
That's a great analogy.
There you go.
Yeah. No more deer in the headlights moments.
Right.
When somebody asks you a question.
Right.
Speaking of questions, the guide delves into how to ask questions well.
It's important.
Which is important.
Right.
And using verbs correctly, which can be tricky in English.
Well, it's the backbone of a sentence.
That's true. You've got to have that verb in there.
And have it. Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just all messed up.
Word salad.
It is.
Right. So it's all about empowering you to communicate.
Yes.
So that you're not hung up on, do you say that right? Or is this correct? You can focus on just connecting with people and experiencing the culture.
I love that.
Right.
That should be the goal. Not to be perfect, but to just be able to experience it.
Exactly. And now that we have that solid foundation in place, let's move on to the more social part of things.
I'm ready. Let's do it. It's my favorite part.
Yeah, me too, actually. This is where the rubber meets the road, right?
It does. This is where l'anglais pour les nuls really shines, I think. Because we've got the sounds down, we've got the grammar down.
Right. Yeah.
But now it's like, okay.
Now you got, use it.
How do we actually use this?
Right.
In a social setting.
In the real world. With real people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so the guide kind of jumps right into it with greetings.
Right.
And it seems so basic.
Yeah.
But it's so easy to kind of mess up those greetings.
You're right. And it does depend, like, geographically where you are.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Like, Americans, for example, they're big on, how are you?
Oh, tell me about it.
And they don't really want to know how you are.
No.
No.
And I always fall for it.
It's just a pleasantry. Right.
I'm like ready to launch into my whole life story.
Right. And they're like, okay, bye.
Yeah, they moved on.
See ya.
Exactly. So it's like, what's the best way to handle that?
The guide suggests, I'm fine, thanks. Or just, how are you? Back,
Right.
Just keep it light, keep it moving.
Mirror them.
Exactly.
Got it. Yeah, don't overthink it.
Don't overthink it.
Okay, so greetings, super important. Another thing that I thought was really interesting was the whole idea of personal space.
Yeah.
Which, again, varies from culture to culture.
Massively.
Massively. And what might be okay in one culture
is completely different.
is completely taboo in another. So for Americans, how would you define that?
I think they like a bigger bubble.
They do, right?
Yeah, they like a bit more space.
Okay. So that whole, stand closer than you think is comfortable thing.
Maybe not so much.
Maybe not.
Maybe not.
Okay, I appreciate that. I've been in those situations where
Yeah, I can feel a little awkward.
I'm sure I've made people uncomfortable, so.
Well, it's all part of the learning process, right?
That's right. It's all a learning experience. I love how the guide talks about first names,
Yeah.
that whole thing about how in some cultures it takes a long time
It's a big deal.
to earn that right,
Yeah.
to call somebody by their first name.
Yeah.
And then in America, it's like,
Hey, what's your name? Okay, Bob.
exactly. Like the first time you meet them, it's what's your name? Write it down. Boom. We're good. But it can feel weird.
It can, especially if you're coming from a culture where it's more formal.
For sure. For sure.
But don't be afraid. It's not meant to be disrespectful. It's just their way of being casual and friendly.
It's their way of kind of like, breaking down those barriers.
Exactly.
To be more approachable. And it's funny because I've even seen that in like, email correspondence.
Yeah.
Where I'll get an email from somebody I've never ever met before.
Right.
And they'll sign off with their first name.
Yeah, exactly. And you're like, who are you?
Yeah, I know. Who are you? Like, give me like at least an initial.
Right.
Okay. So we're talking about all this, like navigating the social scene.
Right.
But what about when you're actually out and about? You're in an English-speaking country.
Yeah.
The guide doesn't leave you hanging. They give you some really good practical tips. Like, for example, asking for directions.
Oh, essential.
So essential.
Especially if you get lost easily, like me.
Well, and even if you don't, I think we've all been in that situation where we think we're understanding.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it's like, wait, what?
You're in a different country.
Yeah.
I'm lost.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I think the guide really just emphasizes being clear,
Yes.
Like instead of just saying, like, turn left, be like, turn left to the traffic light or turn left after the, whatever.
Right. And as the person receiving those directions, don't be afraid to, can you repeat that? Or did you say left or right?
What was that last thing? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Because otherwise you're going to be walking around forever.
Exactly. Going in circles.
Okay, what about public transportation? Because that can be tricky too.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Especially if you're not familiar with how it works.
Like buying a ticket.
Yeah.
What is that process like?
Yeah. The guide has some helpful phrases, like a single ticket to, or a return ticket to, wherever you're going.
Perfect. Okay, this is good stuff. What about ordering food? Because that always makes me nervous.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Because sometimes those menus,
oh my gosh,
they get so creative. You're like, what is this?
It sounds like they're speaking a foreign language.
I know. Exactly.
It is a foreign language.
But that's part of the fun, right?
It is. It's part of the fun.
Trying new things, being adventurous.
And sometimes you get a really pleasant surprise. You're like, oh, that was delicious.
Exactly.
But sometimes...
And then other times you're like...
yeah, sometimes you got to spit it out.
What is this? I'm not going to name any names, but I've definitely had some interesting meals.
We've all been there.
So yeah, ordering food. Like, how can the guide help with that?
Well, I think it just encourages you to understand the different levels of formality, you know? Like if you're just at a casual cafe, you can be more casual with your language.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're at a fancy restaurant, you might want to, brush up on your fancy words.
Right? Your formal English.
Exactly. But yeah, no, don't be afraid to ask questions. Like point to something on the menu and be like, what is this?
What's in this? Yeah, exactly. I love it. Okay, I'm ready for the most fun part. Let's talk about the cultural faux pas.
The good stuff.
This is the best part. I love this.
Right, where we talk about all the funny little cultural differences.
Yes, where cultures collide and it's like, wait, what?
Exactly. Like you think you understand and then you're like, whoa, I did not know that.
It's so interesting. And l'anglais pour les nuls has some great examples of this.
Oh, yeah, it does. It really highlights how language and culture, they're just so intertwined, you know?
They are. It's like you can't have one without the other.
Exactly. Like you can learn all the grammar rules in the world.
Right.
But if you don't understand the cultural context, you're going to miss something.
You're going to miss something. And I think the homely wife example, oh my gosh, that was so fun.
It's classic.
It is. To think that what's considered a compliment, like a nice thing to say in one culture,
right,
is actually kind of insulting in another.
It's all about those subtle nuances, right?
It is. And the meaning behind the words.
Yeah, like you think you're saying something nice and they're like, excuse me?
Yeah. So that's a good reminder to really pay attention. Speaking of things that you think you understand, the verb smell.
Oh, yeah. That one can get you in trouble.
It can. Like you think you're saying something nice,
Right.
and it's like, whoa, wait, no, how does that work?
Well, in English, if you say, like, I smell,
Right.
without anything else, it usually means, like, you smell bad.
You're smelly.
Yeah.
Mm.
So you gotta be careful with that one.
So how do you say it in a way that's not going to offend anybody?
Well, you could say something like, that smells lovely.
Okay.
Or, oh, what a wonderful fragrance.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah, it's much safer that way.
Good to know, good to know. Okay, what about Tuesday versus Thursday?
Ah, yes. The classic tongue twister.
I still get those two mixed up.
They sound so similar.
They do.
Especially for language learners, it can be tricky.
It's like, which one is which? What am I saying?
Right, but, like with anything, practice makes perfect.
Practice does make perfect. Okay, so we've talked about so many interesting things.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
From pronunciation to grammar to cultural quirks.
To how to not offend people.
All right, the essentials.
It's so fascinating, though, how much variation there is.
I know.
Even within, the English-speaking world.
Exactly, and that's what makes it so interesting to learn about, right?
It does. It makes you want to keep exploring and keep learning.
Exactly.
You never know what little nugget you're going to find.
Exactly. And, even with all the best guides and all the tips in the world,
Right.
Sometimes you just got to dive in and experience it for yourself.
That's so true. You can't learn everything from a book.
Exactly. Make those mistakes, Embrace the awkward moments.
Yes, that's how you learn.
It's all part of the fun.
It is. It is. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into l'anglais pour les nuls.
I agree. It's been a pleasure.
This has been so much fun, and I hope our listeners have enjoyed this exploration of Anglo-American culture as much as we have.
Me too.
And remember, even small steps can lead to a world of understanding. Until next time, keep those ears open, those minds curious, and we'll see you on our next deep dive.